Back in action. Department number 1, Office of Management and Budget items that require board approval. Ms. Stephanie Murley.
Good afternoon. We have 2 items on the Department 1 OMB item today. Our first item is permission to accept the Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 formula grant. This is a grant award of $1.1 million to provide operating and capital assistance funds to the MARTI system. This grant includes $400,000 for the purchase of a bus. A grant match of $508,000 is required, which will be matched with another public transportation block grant, as well as the Transit Division operating budget, which is already budgeted. The second item is a permission to accept the FDOT South County Line Road Bridge Replacement Project. We are getting an award for $3 million for funding the construction of the bridge replacement. It requires a match of approximately $3.2 million, which is already budgeted within the bridge maintenance CIP. And we just need a CIP revision to recognize those grant revenues that were unanticipated. And that's all.
Move approval. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Contracts that meet the threshold for board approval over or $1 million or greater. Christy Brotherton.
Excellent speech this morning. Very well done.
Yes, very well done.
Absolutely. We don't have a mouse down here. Okay. Christy Brotherton, Chief Procurement Officer. I have one item for your consideration today, which is a continuing services contract for aviation planning services. This contract has a maximum not to exceed value of $3 million and a maximum not to exceed term of 5 years. Staff is recommending that the board award the contract to Environmental Science Associates Corporation and Hoyle Tanner and Associates. And staff is recommending that the board authorize the county administrator or designee to execute all documents related to this request. And that concludes this item.
Cool.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Department number 3, discussion for the board to provide direction on next steps for the Palm City property purchase in October 2023. Mr. Donaldson and Stephanie Murley.
Thank you, Stephanie, for hanging around on this one.
She wanted to walk away and come back.
I don't blame her. No.
In dramatic effect.
Yes, dramatic.
She's coming back.
Coming back.
Okay, so this is to talk about the property that we acquired in Palm City this last year, and which we purchased for $4,028,000. The board directed staff to look at any public purposes that we might need for this property, and also we did a bridge loan, if you will, from reserves, and then we were directed to consider a bank loan. The third item was to, look at future uses of the property. So since that time, 2 things have happened. One that are significant. One is Public Works has had in the CIP for a number of years the improvement of Danforth Creek in the vicinity of this property. It shows up on our studies in terms of some restrictions that we need to clean out. And so this having a portion of this property to provide access for Danforth Creek would be valuable. They don't need a lot of it, but there's a triangular piece that is to the west of the entrance road that's already there, and then proportional to what we already spent, acreage unit cost, it values at $800,000. So those funds we would use from our some fund balance in Public Works to pay for that, and it would not affect our current year operations. The other piece of it was the district funds has $250,000 that we were going to use on the down payment no matter what for the loan, and with a bank loan, currently at 4.5%, we'd be looking at in excess of, I think, 500,000 or so in interest charges over the life of the loan. I know there's a desire also to look at the millage rates this year and keep all millage rates flat. There, we were close on the district millage on whether to be able to keep that flat to be able to pay for the payment and interest charges on a bank loan. It's also significant to note that we took $4 million out of the fund balance, or from general fund reserves. The 800,000 plus the 250,000 will go back into the general fund reserves. And then the clerk had done a good job this last year with our investments in terms of what we do with what we have in our reserves. And Stephanie, in your item earlier, was able to put back a couple of $1 million into those general fund reserves. So we have, and she also mentioned hurricane reserves, which is, we have a separate fund now that's kind of dealing with capital projects or parks, public works types of repairs. So we were able to reimburse that largely with FEMA reimbursements that we finally got in and some other funds. So that leaves you about $1 million short on the general fund reserves. And so that's why the first item was, should we continue with a bank loan? And staff's appraisal was that it would make more sense just to continue this with just an interfund loan, since our deficit in the general fund reserve is now significantly reduced. The other concept is that there's been discussion with the district about putting this back on the market. And if you were to sell this, depending upon the bank loan, you may have penalties if you pay it off early and those types of things. So given the fact that depending upon the loan we get, it would be simpler to do an interfund loan. So the policy discussion on this is twofold. One is, would you accept switching to go from a bank loan to an interfund loan? And then the second piece of that is, historically, for the last 10 years or so, you've been doing interfund loans at 0%. And that's what's presented in here. Although if the board wanted to change that policy, you could charge a nominal percent of something similar to what SRF does, which is around 2%. So that's the first policy discussion. Is simply, that was the main point of this item, was to look at, one, accepting the use of a portion of the property by Public Works and allow them to purchase that piece from the essentially from the CRA and the district. And then the second piece was to allow us to go to an interfund loan. And if you consider that, then what's the interest rate? And then finally, the other item to consider was the final disposition of the property and how we resolve what is to be done with the remaining property. It's been suggested from some expressed interest of members of the business community that they would like to see like an opportunity to build some commercial office space or something to that nature there. And so the only way we could see of doing that and still retain the original purpose was to limit the scale and intensity of what was going on there, was by a deed restriction. And we've had some conversations with our legal counsel that has helped us with real estate matters in the past. And it is within the board's purview to have a deed restriction that would essentially limit the type of activities that could go on there, whether you could limit the number of stories, the number of square foot. You can even limit to the type of development. Let's say it's only commercial and no residential. I'm not asking you to actually come up with that today, but the idea was that if you are willing to consider that, staff would bring back at a future agenda item a recommendation of what or specific those restrictions on there, since I don't have the actual deed restrictions for you to approve today, but we would bring that back if that was okay with the board. So that's the the general overview, again, we're looking at, first, I think the most important thing for us to establish is whether or not we continue going out for a bank loan or authorize the internal loan. We are recommending that we go to an internal loan, again, for two reasons. One, that we've been able to put the amount of deficit that's in the general fund reserves has now been reduced to 1 million, while the CRA and the district still owe the amount that was borrowed. The other reason is that if there is an inclination or approval to put this back on the market, this likely would be a temporary loan at best anyway. So that concludes my remarks, and Stephanie's here to help with any analysis on loans or rates if we need to. And then myself and Ms. Woods can talk to deed restrictions if that the purview of the board.
Commissioner Campy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. It was very difficult to sit there quietly and hear that whole presentation. But I appreciate you very much, and Ms. Woods and Ms. Murley. We have had colleagues, we have had plenty of meetings about this behind the scenes with staff. I wanted to first say thank you to the folks that help us put this deal together in the first place. I'm sure some of you had heard from the same people that I had, that just to bring folks, to remind them what we were talking about here. It's a 6-acre piece of property on Martin Highway, right next door to Palm City Elementary School, and also adjacent to Palm City School Avenue, which in the old school configuration was a somewhat much less used entrance and exit to the school site. Most of the traffic for school, Palm City Elementary School, came down 34th Street. But when they built the new school, they eliminated all vehicular traffic on 34th Street to the school site, except for teachers and buses and all of the students biking, walking, or riding in a car with their parents have to use Palm City School Avenue. The second thing is it's 6 acres, but can you bring up the picture of the site? That shows, I guess, the parcel that the Public Works was interested in. That. Okay, so now the 6 acres is all encompassed to the right here where it says 1.7 acres in that green section, and then you see Southwest Newbury Court. The Newbury Court and everything to the west of it, that green shaded area, counts as the density calculation, but really nothing could have been used there. Or done there for the development. Most of it would have had to happen on the site to the east. And also, if you see right above where it says 1.17 acres, there's a little house there in that corner. That little corner part is not part of the property. So imagine, if you will, my colleagues know this, but for those folks maybe watching at home, along the bottom of the screen is Southwest Martin Highway. And so if you see right to the left of where there's a tree at the entrance of Southwest Newbury Court, the first of the three-story apartment buildings would start 14 feet off the sidewalk. It would be 30 to 35 feet tall. It would come directly heading east and stop sort of where that dashed line comes down the center. Dividing that center portion in half is the first building. Then to the right of that building, to the corner of Palm City School Avenue, is the second 3-story building. Then you turn the corner, there was just north of the building on Martin Highway is a swimming pool and clubhouse. And then the third of the 3-story buildings aiming east, facing east, would be there. So as you know in the CRAs, that you have to build close to the road, so the concept of a landscape buffer or anything like that would have been minimal. You actually would have opened your door if you had one of those apartments. You would have opened your front door, stepped out onto the porch, walked down a couple of steps, and been standing on the sidewalk on Martin Highway. So I really appreciate that we were able to stop that. Now, people say, why did you do that? Well, it was legally allowable. So there wasn't much in our discretion to stop that kind of project. Now, would that have been compatible with the local area? No, there's nothing at all similar to that, not just here, nearly anywhere in all of Palm City. That would have been the first time something like that would have happened. And then some folks said to me, well, you're supposed to be, a big proponent for affordable housing, and you're eliminating 90 apartments. These were not affordable housing units. These were going to be market rate units. There were going to be 123 parking spaces for 90 apartments, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. So I don't have to convince my colleagues, hopefully, that this wouldn't have been our best work. Now, some people say, well, you just gave money to the developer. You just gave him a free. They paid $2.1 million. They didn't share with us exactly what they had spent to date, but you can imagine bringing a 90-unit apartment project through our development process. It's got a price tag. I was ballparking between $500,000 to $600,000 or $700,000 to bring it forward. So then we had it appraised. 3 of you agreed with me to at least enter into the negotiations, which I very much appreciate. We did. It appraised for $4.5 million in one appraisal and $4,050,000 in another. It came back to the board for the final, and we were able to still maintain a majority to purchase it. That day, we started to talk about, how would you fund it? And my friend and colleague, Commissioner Jenkins, was pretty adamant about making sure it was going to be a bank loan. I did not want to get too deep into a debate with him at the time because all along, my intention as the district commissioner was that we would not hold on to this property. You don't spend $4 million to make it a dog park, even though we need a dog park, but that wouldn't have made fiscal financial sense. Lots of residents reached out to me and said, just leave it alone. Just leave it exactly the way that it is. And I didn't think that made fiscal sense either. If it was already our property, maybe, but you can't spend that kind of money. And then it also, if it was a governmental use, it's off the tax roll forever. So I did not want to, at that time, negotiate, of the negotiation, show all of my cards up front. But the goal there was to get the property into our ownership, and then the second phase, which is what we're doing now, is to put it back out. I will share with you all that several people prior to that whole experience and many more afterwards have reached out to me and said, I'd like a piece. I have a great idea. I have this. Can I get a percentage? Can I get the whole thing? But as you well know, this has to follow the governmental process of request for proposal. And I told all of those people that, some were probably not in a financial situation to do it, but several are. And I told them, please, follow along with the process. And when we get to an RFP, please include, your bids in the RFP process. Now, to what Mr. Donaldson said about deed restrictions, a lot of people would say, well, how do you stop this from happening again? How do you make sure that the person that buys it doesn't build 70 apartments? Or something that the community at large would also not feel is compatible. And then Ms. Woods and her legal team said that could be accomplished through deed restrictions. Short of changing the zoning, it is still within the CRA, but making sure that it's now that we have it in our ownership, that we could have a little more say. We would all like to have that ability to have a little more say on what would be developed, truly in this portion of Palm City, in the heart of Palm City. And I heard a quote yesterday. The CRA had a development presentation at the Blake Library, which I thought was very well done. And the gentleman that was making the presentation said, we can't eliminate development, but we can guide it. And I thought that was clever. So now here we have our opportunity to guide development here. 5 of us up here, including our staff. There's all sorts of, it should be this or it should be that. To Commissioner Jenkins' point about the financing, I would hope that we can, based on what we heard Mr. Donaldson say, and understanding now that there's no intention of trying to hang on to the property for any extended period of time. If anything, it's the opposite of that. I appreciate staff bringing it forward today because we're trying to move along as quickly as possible to get it back out there, if you will. So an interfund loan is the smartest for several reasons. It's obviously internal, as Mr. Donaldson said. If we do engage a on-the-street bank, a retail bank, there's a lot of strings attached if we end up keeping the money for 6 months or 3 or 4 months or whatever, how long the process would take to close. Why would we want to just, penalize ourselves with fees if we didn't need to? I hope you hearing from our staff and me that our ultimate goal is to, as quickly as possible, put this out as an RFP. I went to the NAC with Susan Corris and Jordan Pistorius to address the NAC board because currently they are our partners in this because some of the funding would have come from the CRA funds in Palm City, as well as all of my district funds. My goal is that, as I said to them, is that we never put our hand in the pocket of the NAC for the funding, because if we turn this the way I'm hoping, they're in the funding for years 3, 4, and 5. And the district funds were for 1 and 2. So hopefully that will work. In terms of the restrictions, I believe that commercial is appropriate. The only restrictions that we're talking about, and Mr. Donaldson said that maybe we'd have to come back, but that's delaying. Hopefully you guys can see it clear to that we would have, as my suggestions, no more than 2 stories, and back it off from some of the current CRA requirements that would put it back up on the sidewalk. I'd like to back it off the road, off of Martin Highway a bit. I think that it does not need to be residential at this particular point in time. I think the commercial value of the property is more appealing to the folks that have reached out to me. No one, if I have 8 people that have engaged me, none of them said they wanted to put residential on it. They all had unique business goals in mind. When I met with the CRA and the NAC board in Palm City, they had originally said, well, maybe we can make a list of the things that we would like to have there. And I said that that would be a very narrow kind of structure I said it needs to be the opposite of that. We need to discuss the things we wouldn't want there and let the market dictate, the free market dictate what someone thinks would work with the criteria. Now, obviously, you can't really see it in this picture, but all of those white roofed buildings to the right upper corner, that's a self-storage and some industrial, but directly behind that, just on the top of that picture, is Palm City Elementary School. Residential leaves you open to who lives there. You're within 100 feet, less than, 100 feet of the property of a school. I would hope that my colleagues would agree that a commercial endeavor would be the way to go. And then in terms of, what else did I have to tell you? The interfund loan, hopefully won't even, as Mr. Donaldson said, won't be a long-term loan. The money that the Public Works is looking to use, and then the district funds that I have in there currently would be the first sort of bite at it. The other thing, I asked if I was allowed to mention it publicly, and I am, but it's not a done deal. There's folks that own the property that's tree-lined in between the shopping center to the west and that green box to the east. That is actually, a portion of that is a developable piece of property that the owner has struggled to come up with anything that would be palatable and was hopefully still interested in potentially donating it to the county. Just to say, look, let me get this off my ledger sheet and work that out. So that's, I know it was very short, my response, but I hope that I can answer your questions and that we can move forward on this, hopefully today. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, first of all, the $4 million appraisal, was that for the existing raw land, or was that for the developed project?
It was, The appraisers knew of the entitlements with the property, but it obviously doesn't include any actual construction on it. But it did, they did consider the zoning and the current market value of that land and its development potential at $4 million.
$4.5 million.
Highest and best use, yes.
Also, the stormwater piece, what's the size of it?
1.17 acres.
Okay. Also, if this isn't in the CIP, if this wasn't programmed for purchase, and you're going to instead be using $800,000 from Public Works, what is not being done?
This funding actually came from interest earned from the market investments that the clerk's office does.
Okay, that's countywide, so every taxpayer is paying that?
It's the franchise fee, the stormwater infrastructure franchise fee.
Okay. Hurricane reserves, countywide,
$10 million.
so every taxpayer is paying for that. General fund reserves, every taxpayer is paying for that. This isn't just coming out of the Palm City taxpayers' pockets. We also have an informal policy of no indebtedness on our successors, on our possible successors. So, and we also have, we know that we're going to be pressured to have no new taxes this year. So what's the MSTU from this past year?
So with the $250,000 down payment, there's $600,000 available for carryover, and then we would have to levy the same $370 that District 5 is currently levying.
So what is this? It was first of all 6 plus 370?
Yes,
250 plus
250
6
plus 6
370.
plus 370.
So there's 600 that's already in was in unspent?
Yes.
And where are you getting the 370?
The 370 is currently what District 5 levies, the
Okay.
370,000.
And so the annual TIF is?
The annual TIF is going to be approximately $600,000.
And it's going to pay for 3 years?
Yes.
If you, 2.5 years from now, you still own the property.
It's 1.8 and 12. Okay. Yeah, I have real difficulty with an interfund loan because it's making everyone in the county pay for it, and we're depleting reserves in order to do this. When it wasn't an anticipated expenditure, it was a spur of the moment expenditure that taxpayers are going to be on the hook for 5 years for. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to support that. If you had sufficient MSTU funds and if you had sufficient TIF funds, you know, I'd be supportive, but this is not the case. This is a project that's being financed on the backs of countywide taxpayers.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so we're taking $800,000 out of our $4 million purchase, leaving 3.2. Are you envisioning being able to off this property with the deed restrictions and the amount of acreage that's been reduced and recover 3.2?
Is that a question?
It is.
Yes, for a couple of reasons. One,
And when?
okay.
How long?
Well, some of that depends on you all. First, to answer your second question first, would we be able to sell the remaining property for approximately 3.2 million, give or take? There's a little bit extra there or less. The parcel that's been removed was the most detrimental portion of the property for anyone else. Nothing could have happened to the west of Newbury Court. You can't see it there in the picture, but to the left of that green is Danforth Creek.
But it had value for density.
It had value for density. However, we're not making this a dog park or something the value of Palm City, centrally located Palm City property, the meat and potatoes of the 4 acres, the most valuable portion of the 4 acres is still there. And so you've knocked down, for 800,000, no one else would have had any use of the property except for density increase, except for Public Works, because they're going to use it as access to Danforth. No one else really could have done anything there. And with all due respect to my colleague, she is looking at a scenario that we don't have this conversation today, that we don't put out an RFP, that we leave it alone. And, I respect her opinion and her mindset. She did not support the conversation to even negotiate a contract. She did not support the purchase. So that being said, if we did follow along with my colleague's strategy, they would be building 90 apartments right now. Right now, that would have 90 apartments. And so then not only the district commissioner, but everybody else would have to, this room would be filled up with people, whether I brought them or not, saying, what are you doing? Most of the speakers this morning said, stop it, enough. It's not compatible. You're destroying the feel of our community. There's nothing like this anywhere in Palm City. I, with the help of staff and some local residents, crafted a plan that took basically a approved project, 90 apartments, off the drawing board. To most of my residents, probably our residents, didn't realize this was going to happen. But had they, we would have had nothing but screaming and yelling. So I appreciate my colleagues that backed this decision. It's not on the backs of all taxpayers, because you heard from Ms. Murley, the first 2 years are coming from district funds, and the last 3 years, if it even went that long, are coming from the CRA, the Palm City CRA. That's not everybody. But that being said, with the $800,000 to purchase this, give me a week and I will go through every land purchase that the county has made throughout the entire county and shown how much money the Palm City and District 5 residents, taxpayers, chipped in to buy property in Hobe Sound, Port Salerno, New Monrovia, Jensen Beach, Tropical Farms. I don't ever think of it that way. Everyone in the county should look at this and say, okay, that worked. I see this as one of the higher achievements that I will have accomplished in my political career, is to not only stop those 90 apartments from being built right there, but then put the property back out to something that the community can embrace. And there's a lot of different ways. I don't want to share with you what the folks, all recognizable names, local folks, would love to have an opportunity to build there. It will go from something that was a blight, in my opinion, on the landscape in Palm City, to something that everyone will be like, this really is an enhancement for the community. One of the things that I've always factor in is storage units, assisted living facilities, and apartments only benefit the people that actually use them. If you're not storing stuff, it's no value to you. If you're not putting a relative into an assisted living facility, there's no value to the general community. And if you're not living in one of those apartments, there's no value, versus retail space, restaurants, doctor's offices, professional office space benefits everyone. I think this is a tight plan. I would very much hope to find support from at least 2 of my colleagues to move this forward, because it's doing what I said I would do, which is stop the apartments and put the property back out onto the tax rolls at really no dramatic financial detriment to our taxpayers.
Mr. Hurd.
Yeah, this project could not have been built, would not have complied with the unincorporated regulations. It only complies, it only works inside the CRAs. And that's because the commission majorities over the years have weakened the regulations in CRAs to allow a 90-unit apartment building to be built. You've increased densities, you've decreased compatibility, you've decreased open spaces, you've decreased setbacks, you've forced the buildings to be placed right on the road. I voted against every one of those things in order to protect neighborhoods like this. This is one of the problems with the CRAs is that the regulations are just so different there than they are in unincorporated. And that's why you have a proposal for a 90-unit 90-unit apartment building, because it's allowable. But I voted against every one of those.
Well, if you ask Wawa in Hope Sound, directly the opposite happened to them. So, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I don't, unless staff's done an analysis on what could have been built here when it was in its former configuration of life, I don't know the answer to that, whether it could have been more or less or indifferent. Ed, a couple of things I just want to share with you in terms of how I think about something like this. We had 150, 120 people, whatever it was, show up one day to support you to purchase this piece of property.
I was supporting them.
Okay. Either way. Regardless, we listened to the community that showed up, a lot of recognizable faces and a lot of people that are fully involved in the community. But there were different opinions that were shared, lots of them. And so what I'm concerned about is somewhat the approach that you're thinking is that somehow, in your mind, we've already defined what the end use should be for this. And I think an opportunity that we're missing with the community at large that showed up is to work with them to have them tell us what they think ought to be there. I think it is an incredible opportunity to take a prime piece of real estate in the middle of the old Palm City CRA. And like you said, there are maybe some really great potential uses. I just think, I think for this particular type of property, not going back out to the community and engaging them in the discussion to start forming the parameters of what something like this could look like is a missed opportunity. And what you would be giving the 150, 200 people that showed up here the opportunity to participate in is having your community actually help you define what it should be. And whether or not the design kept it up to the street front or not, if it was the right use and it was the right location, maybe that is the right thing to do. We don't know and we won't know. The other piece of this, I think, is that no matter how narrowly we design the covenants, let's say the assumption here is that someone's going to bid $3.2 million to buy this, right? I mean, that's kind of where you're taking us on this. What if somebody comes in and offers you $6 million? And it's not exactly what you want? And I don't want to pick on any particular retail outlet, but let's say it's a retail outlet that seems to be trying to locate itself in every kind of community. What if they offer you 10? Because quite frankly, to them, it's 4 acres in the prime heart of a very urbanized community that for that particular use would be prime time. I think the possibility could be very real that happens, that someone says, look, $10 million for a piece of property in the middle of Palm City, for what my intended use for it is nothing. Great for paying back the taxpayers, fantastic. But it may not be the use that you have in your mind that is exactly what it wants to be. I think the power of going and having a night where we bring in some people to help us. The other component of this, and we've done this multiple different times with projects that I've been involved in over the years. The commercial real estate folks in Martin County will have a definition of what they think should go there. Absolutely, they'll know what they think will fit there. Huh?
And how they're going to pay for it.
and how much they're going to pay for it. But that also doesn't for a second say that somebody's willing to do something outside of what they would ever think of. I mean, Harold just mentioned an example in Hope Sound. Never crossed my mind that someone would come in and tear down a bank building and build a Wawa on the corner. I mean, but it's altogether possible. So I think I'm supportive of the financing mechanism, Ed, to get us, you, where we need to get with our internal loan. I heard about after the last presentation we had how much interest we were looking at, and that never came up in the conversation. And I think had it, we wouldn't even be having this conversation today if we'd known it was going to be $600,000 to $800,000 in interest over the course of the loan. And I think I was supportive, but I went along with helping you try to get to your goal on this thing. But I would have supported an internal loan because I know we would have figured out how to pay it back, and it would all worked out. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the structure of the financing piece of it. I just think as much engagement as you had from your community, it would be super cool, because at the end of the day, what I think you're going to want, even though in those 200 people, 150 people, whatever there were, maybe there were 6 ideas that popped up or 5 ideas, right? There's going to be winners and losers on the idea. The people who wanted the dog park, it's not going to be a dog park. But if you gave them the opportunity to sit at a table with 6 other people and say, I want a dog park, and the other 5 people don't want a dog park, but they think it ought to be this, and all of those things come together and a consensus is built from the community, this is what we'd like to see happen. Then I think it's a home run. I think you get the best of all worlds. You get complete community involvement, you get complete buy-in. And sure, there are going to be people that wanted a dog park that aren't going to get a dog park. Fair enough. So I'm just suggesting that you might want to do that.
Thank you.
Well, think about how you're going to put that into a motion while Mr. Campy talks.
Well,
I could do my motion. I appreciate that, Doug. I did not, after we got the approval from, and yes, Commissioner Smith, you were supportive of this decision, this concept from the beginning, and I appreciate you for that very much. Because I think, I keep saying 90 apartments because that's what it was going to be. And I brought Ms. Corus up because I remember you telling me something that the unincorporated or the CRA did not increase the density. Is that true?
CRAs did not increase density past 15 acres, 15 units an acre throughout. We don't have any densities past that.
So making it a CRA or those rules didn't necessarily make it go from fewer units to 90. It could always have been 90.
That's correct.
Okay, it just brought it to the street and all the other things.
That's correct.
And, obviously I'm a big, historically lifelong proponent of the CRAs. Commissioner Jenkins, as I've mentioned in the past, I think his political career started in his frustration on what was happening on Bridge Road. One of the reasons I had even thought about coming back was how all of a sudden Map Road, the wheels just fell off. And we had brought our residents right to the to the tipping point of having something start, and then it was like, no, we're not doing it. So that's why 2 of us are sitting up here for the most part now. However, to me, a CRA is a Main Street vibe. Map Road, Bridge Road, Jensen Beach Boulevard, Osceola, Main Street. Martin Highway is not a main street. It's not designed to be a main street, but through the history of, and I was not here when the CRA boundary was stretched all the way from Map Road down, because this project you see to the left was originally Stewart Fine Foods. That was done by my predecessor back in 2000 or 2003 or 4. And at the time, I would have agreed that that was a smart strategy to bring a much-needed supermarket to Palm City when there was only one. So that's why. And the concept, and I don't want to get into a tit-for-tat with my colleague, we're trying very hard to be collegial and cordial to each other, but throwing down some of those things make it difficult to make it sound like this is our fault and she voted no on all of those things. Because if I were to go there, I would say the things happening in Port Salerno are all over the place. So let's all focus our attention on these individual projects and not try to beat each other up over it. I understand the complete, difference of opinion. But this wasn't my fault, or Commissioner Smith's fault, or my colleagues to the left here who are newer than the three of us. This is what I was dealing with at the time, and I think we've created a strategy that works. Commissioner Smith, I had not been quiet or silent with the colleagues and my constituents in the district. Lots of people afterwards came up and gave all sorts of suggestions. And the reason I sort of steered clear of a charrette or a more formalized process is there was no uniformed response. There was no consensus.
Can I interrupt?
Yes,
That is the process.
I understand.
The process is you take the most divergent ideas and you take the vision of those divergent ideas and you start to mash them together. And what it also does is people sitting at one table that aren't having the same conversation at another table, and they're having an entirely different conversation in the table next to them. When presentations are made with what they come up with, some people at the other table go, I never thought about that. That never crossed my mind. And so I'm not saying it's perfect, Ed. I just think, given how much attention this has, and given the opportunity, it would be well worth, I think, and healthy for the community to participate in a way that you end up with, they end up with a consensus that most people will be okay with. But that's just me.
I appreciate it. Let me just, before you go to Commissioner, just finalize my thought. I'm not opposed to that. We got some feedback from the NAC board members. I've gotten feedback. What I would humbly request of my colleagues that are interested in participating, hopefully two of you, would be that we follow the funding recommendation from our staff, knowing in your minds that this is a very fluid, moving process, and that the concept of keeping it separate from additional internal funds to go to a bank loan and then forcing us to pay 25, 30, 50, whatever the number could potentially be, I'm estimating, is not in our best strategy. And two, and this is a motion, put it out there, a motion that we accept staff's recommendation for the funding mechanism, and two, that we allow I will participate with Ms. Corris's help and the NAC to have an evening at the Palm City Chamber very quickly to invite everyone to participate in a brainstorming session, but so that we're also on a parallel track, not wasting time, to allow a RFP to hit the street, because there's a long, right? Okay. It's a process. The only reason I say that is that if somebody comes forward with the financing and a vision of what could happen there, then we bring that to the community and say, what about this? Because instead of the community saying, this is what we would like, now go find someone to do it, this is someone that's saying, I would do this here. Thank you.
That you have the ability to say no.
Well, that's the RFP process.
Okay. Commissioner Heatherington.
What I heard, was not my original comment, but what I heard Mr. Donaldson say was put it back out to market. What I just heard you say was put out a RFP.
That's the only way you can put it out to market.
You just can't, we can't put this on surplus as take out the, so you're going to take, the stormwater piece is going to be included in the parcel, and you're not going to market this as real property or put it out on surplus. You're going to put an RFP together?
Mr. Donaldson can jump in. I think state law requires if we're going to sell the property that we would put it out for bid. We wouldn't, if we put it on the surplus list,
You would auction it?
no, we could ask for a request for proposal. The preliminary discussions that I've had was that we would have an idea of what the deed restrictions would be, and then put it out for a request for proposal. This was done back in the day with the Gershbein property where, what's it called, Renard River Place is. I don't know if it's River Place anymore, but if you remember at the north end of Jensen, we did a request for proposal. The RFP kind of outlined what the county was looking for, and then we received the proposals. We only received one. But again, then that would be up to the board. It would come back to the board to decide which one. We have put property up for, it's similar to a bid, but it allows you a little more discretion if the board wants to look at what they want to do.
It also allows you to reject it if you don't think the
Yes.
price was bid too low.
Yeah.
You know, so that.
That's why we crafted it that way.
Commissioner Heatherington, Susan Corres, Office of Community Development, I just wanted to add that statutorily, any disposition of property in the CRA has to go through an RFP process.
So I never was, I appreciate Commissioner Campy's efforts, and he did it, with good intent, I think, on behalf of his residents. I never supported the interfund loan. I was adamantly against doing it. I understand that there's cost, but there's cost sometimes to having this unconventional way to guide the free market. So I think that process that you're describing is not like remarketing the property. It's going to take a considerable amount of time, and I would be against I would still stay with my original intent. I would not agree with providing an interfund loan for the property. And what kind of timeline are you thinking for this?
Are you talking to me?
I was looking at Sarah Woods, but
Oh,
if you have an answer.
well, I can offer my answer. Two things to your comments. One, if, as Mr. Donaldson said, we haven't done it in the past, but if it makes you more comfortable and I need it to happen, I can use district funds while I am the district commissioner to pay a interest rate to the interfund. So it's not zeroed, it's not a 0% interest interfund loan. If you are comfortable with a couple of percentage points would make you feel more comfortable and I need your support, then I would put that on the table. Two, Commissioner Smith's idea of the charrette and going through the process, in my mind, is an excellent idea, but I see, like in the old-fashioned movies, the calendar pages falling away. That's what I see versus my idea was to move this pretty quickly. I have a huge advantage. I know people that are waiting for a bid to hit the street that will come forward with ideas that are really great. And I think, yes, there would be a little bit of a leadership push for the community. I feel comfortable enough with the groups that have reached out to me after the fact that say, okay, we wanted to do this. My only concern, and Commissioner Smith, that is traditionally the way we've done a lot of things, bring the community together, see what we want. I don't see this, one, because of the financing and the speed that we're looking to move at, and two, this is not it's not like Jock Layton Park or Charlie Layton Park. This is, as Commissioner Hurd said, something that came up. We crafted a strategy that could work to guide what we want our community to look like under this current set of circumstances and move it quickly. Each of you come with a different sort of decision and mindset that I'm trying to appeal and work with each of you so that I can get a couple of you to agree. It would be so much easier if I sat up here by myself. But that being said, I'm confident. And remember, I'm stopping those apartments. You'll hear from the same constituents. It wouldn't have just been yelling at me about the apartments. They would have yelled at you guys too. So you can take as much credit as you would prefer that this was a project that stopped it. I'm done. I yield my time back.
I'm gonna speak now. So where I got excited about making sure that it was encumbered by the Palm City folks and not, was because it was going to be a $4 million, in my mind, we're talking about a $4 million dog park. We're talking about a $4 million property hold. We're talking about, if you are actively pursuing recouping at least the 3.2, we've justified the 8, it doesn't, I'm going to rescind my thing that it doesn't make sense to go out and pay closing costs and interest and all this other stuff. If it is a short-term thing, we have they bring us back an idea of what deed restrictions are going to be, whether that is through staff or whether that's through public input. And this is fast-tracked to, because this is a very desirable piece of property. I don't think it would take long.
I agree
So
with
I would support
Thank
that,
you.
right?
I promise,
So-
I commit to
But-
making this as fast as the government
But
allows.
when we were first talking, we had no idea. This was going to be a long-term hold, and I'm going, no, my Hope Sound folks are not, or Indiantown folks are not going to pay for your dog park.
I agree
Simple
with
as
you.
that.
I just couldn't mention it to you at that time. I was trying to
So-
negotiate piece by piece.
To speed this along, where this conversation is going, I'm supportive of.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Let's try another couple angles on how you get where you want to get. We did a project down in Lake Worth with the Regional Planning Council a year ago. There was a historic site, there was a lot, there was a parking lot, and there were a couple other things. It was a really tight site. And there was a ton of opposition to just selling it off and redeveloping it and doing its thing. And the RPC went down there, and they worked with the community, and they worked with them, and they worked with them, and they came up with some spectacular concepts of how to deal with what would otherwise have potentially even eliminated the historic site altogether and/or been something that nobody wanted. They are the best at what they do. They have incredible amounts of resources and talent. They're financial guys that they use that come in and do analysis on what is highest and best, what are the economics of the site, is really world-class stuff. And not that that should make a difference, Ed, I don't think, but I think from the actual end use, because another thing you're going to want to do, I would think, and I know it may take some more time, but there's an iterative process for doing request for qualifications. Do they in fact even have the capability, the developer, whoever it is, to pull off and do what you're wanting to do?
Yes.
And, well, yes, they,
Not even a question about it.
and that may be, but you're going to put this thing out to bid.
Right.
And if there's 6 people that you know that are going to bid on it, and the 7th person outbids them,
Well, we have the choice.
I just wanted to, we were talking about a request for proposal.
I
So
know,
that would, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be bound to take the lowest
I understand.
money, I mean, the highest money bid. You would be able, you would look at it as a whole.
Okay, let's use the opposite spectrum, and I have no idea, and maybe they've already told you what they're willing to pay you for it. But let's say the goal is to recoup the 3.2 million. Okay, let's say 5 of the bids come in at 299, 300, or 3 million, and a 7th one comes in at 3.3. And the others are $300,000 short of what the payback price is. But you don't know the 7th person. Who are we going to pick? Or are we going to be forced with the decision at that point?
Well, we would know who the 7th person is because they'd have to follow the criteria of the bid, just like
There
if
would
we knew
be-
none of them.
There would be criteria for which to
All right.
compare each of the proposals to see which, and that, again, would be up to the board to decide.
Again, that's going to put us in a bind, because the other thing that's going to happen, and this will happen, and this wasn't dissimilar to the property down in Hope Sound that was the fire station, right? We went into that with the best of intentions, and an individual bought it, and we didn't like the outcome. And that put us in a real bind. And of course, the next door neighbor wanted to buy it, and his bid wasn't enough or something to get him where he needed to be, and it went to the other person. So I just, if.
I get it.
if
Everything's
some-
complicated.
If some of this stuff can be done up front, and you can eliminate as much of the conflict, which we talked about with the fire station, that perhaps we should have done a better job of eliminating the conflicts, That's just, that's it.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Having minimum standards of what we're looking for on this property. If somebody comes in with another 90-unit apartment building, they're going to get bounced. I don't care whether they got 10 million or not, right?
I get that.
Yeah.
But like the fire station, they wanted to put a water purification company in, but our zoning said, no, you can do this in this box because we didn't pre-do the zoning.
We didn't change the zoning. We
Ahead of
should
time.
have changed it.
Anyway,
And we are doing that this time with the deed restrictions.
Okay, Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah. Commissioner Campy, I completely concur with you that the 90-unit apartment was a disastrous proposal. No one would want that in their CRA. So I wish you the best. I hope that the perfect plan lands in your lap. And it may.
Thank you.
And I hope it does.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Could you repeat your,
My motion is that we would allow look, we're in an interfund loan temporarily right now, which was part of the original motion that said to allow staff to do this while we were out there looking for the financing. What I did not want to say at the time is we didn't need to be looking for long-term financing because there are people right behind the original purchase that want to step in.
motion?
Yes, the motion is that we leave the funding mechanism in place that is currently set, and that we put out an RFP after some deed restrictions are put in place to answer your questions about how do you stop it from doing that again. My only caveat of the deed restrictions is that we don't make it so restrictive that we eliminate potential users that would have paid for it. Or to many of my colleagues' points, if you restrict it to the point where it doesn't have the value, I'm not going to get 3.2 million. My restrictions are more front, side, back setbacks, height restrictions, and non-residential. That leaves it open enough that anyone that wants to participate can participate. To Commissioner Smith's point, what if we don't like it? Well, hopefully, there'll be 2 or 3. Would they qualify to actually be able to pull off their deal? If the people that I know that are involved, and maybe it'll be somebody else that has a better idea. But all of you know who I'm talking about. They can easily afford the property, and what they're looking to do,
Is this still a motion?
yes, that's it. Leave the funding mechanism in place and put out an RFP with the deed restrictions. End of motion.
who's going to create the deed restrictions?
It will come back to you at our next meeting. At the meeting after that one.
Yeah, I was just going to make sure that it's clear, the RFP and would be developed by, you're directing us to develop that RFP and the proposed deed restrictions, and then it would come back to the board for authorization.
Are you going to do some NAC outreach?
I have it ready, and I will.
Like what Doug is asking?
I did that, and we'll do it again. I have my key person right there.
Okay. You happy with that?
I'm on the edge, honestly.
Okay.
I was trying to talk more to win you over, but Harold doesn't want me to talk anymore.
Mr. Donaldson?
I was just going to clarify the beginning of the motion, which was leave the funding in place, which is the first 2 bullets of the item, which allows us to transfer the other ownership that would more specifically define what leave the funding in place means, if you all are okay with those first 2
I'm
bullets.
supporting that because we are actively moving forward to disperse this property.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion.
That doesn't bode well for me if you have to pass the
And
gavel.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, is there any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor then by Commissioner Campy, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Heatherington and her dissenting.
Thank you very
Very
much.
much.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Jenkins. The other 2 commissioners, I don't remember what their names are, but they're dead to me. I'm only kidding. I appreciate your nice
Okay.
comment.
With that, we have reached the end of our meeting. Do we have any 5:05, 2:45 public comment?
Keith Burbank, any comments?
Seeing none, our next meeting is March 12th.
Have to come forward to make the comment. I'm sorry, that was, you were supposed to, I apologize.
Did you miss the Paul Marr discussion?
That was on consent.
Oh, that means it was,
It was approved on our first motion this morning.
with no discussion.
If,
Okay. With that, our next meeting is March 12th, 2024. We are adjourned.